So multiple reports suggest the Chicago Bulls continue to look for a trade for Zach Lavine, and the Pistons could be in play. This comes from Bobby Marks. I feel like he's a pretty reliable source when it comes to rumors out there. He has his ear to the ground. So you already know what the question is. Would you make a trade for Zach Lavine? At his peak, he was averaging, I believe, 27 points per game with the Chicago Bulls. He's a two-time All-Star. Like we talked about on a previous podcast, he's only been to the playoffs one time. And that was in – what year was that? That was, I think, in 2018, 2019 when they were in the playoffs. And, 21-22, excuse me, where he played 4 games, averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. So he's a little bit of a playmaker, shot 43% from the field, 38% from 3 on 6 attempts. So my question, you already know it's coming. Would you make a play or would you trade for Zach Lavine if you were the Pistons GM?
Before I answer that, I want to actually play the audio version of Bobby Marks talking, because I think some people didn't see it about him talking about it. So I'm going to play this clip and then I'll give you my answer after that little 20-second clip.
Detroit is 2-17. I would not be surprised if they stick their toe in the Zach Lavine to see what his market is and see if we can get a guy who's making, a former All-Star who we couldn't get in free agency. And if it doesn't cost us much, maybe just cost us a bunch of expiring contracts and maybe one of the younger kids that they go out and do something like that. That would be a kind of a team I would just keep an eye on as far as with Lavine.
So, to his point, dip their toe in, actually call. Not saying that they'll do it, seeing what the market could possibly be, because, Adrian Wojnarowski a couple of days ago said that there's no trade market for him. They might not get a first-round pick. They might just get some expirings, because to Woj's point and to Bobby Marks's point is, why would I trade for a Zach Lavine that is on a pretty expensive deal that he's not going to be your first best player, maybe not your second best player, maybe your third best player for a lot of these contending teams. But for the Pistons standpoint, and I'll give you my answer in a second, this just reeks of a Blake Griffin trade. And I'm not comparing the two at all. I'm comparing the standpoint of a guy that was a former All-Star, a guy that's on a bigger deal. He can give you points. He can give you production. That's what it reminds me of. Me personally, I've been against it. I know I've seen you and Wes on Twitter saying yeah, I would consider it. He's a hell of a player. I think Zach Lavine's a hell of a player. And I think if he was on the Pistons, I would root for him. But I don't know, man. Do I really want to, get off some expirings? Do I want to throw I'm the spitball. Maybe I throw James Wiseman, Alec Burks, and you got to throw in a young guy. And they'll probably want Jaden Ivey. Are you really willing to do that? I personally would want to get off expiring to try to get something, but I'm probably not going to give the Bulls one of my younger guys. One, I don't want to see him 4 times a year. And if he does good, fans will never shut the hell up about it. We already know that. But I probably wouldn't do the trade. I think he's the type of shooting guard that Cade does need. I will say that. He's the type of shooting guard that you need. You need that movement type of shooter if you think Cade's going to be your point guard. But I would probably pass just because of the contract alone. Not to say that the player isn't a great player. He is. I mean, you look at his stats. He's one of the better players in the NBA. But the contract for me, I was like, yeah, no.
You know how I feel. I love Zach Lavine. I forget who said it, but they were saying how Jaden Ivey and Zach Lavine at the age of 21, that Jaden Ivey was a better player than Zach Lavine. Zach Lavine at 21 years old, his 3rd year in the league, he only played 47 games. They were all starts. He was playing 37 minutes per game, shooting 46% from the field, 39% from 3 on 6.6 attempts, and averaging 19 points per game with 3 rebounds and 3 assists. That's a pretty damn good 3rd season in the NBA at 21 years old. Mm-hmm. I don't know who was saying it, but dude, you were so wrong with what you were saying. I get you're trying to stick up for one of your own. I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, do you see Jaden Ivey being better than Zach Lavine down the line? And at his peak, Zach Lavine was 27 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And those stats in the way he played, shooting 51% from the field, 42% from the three, that got them to the playoffs. He played winning basketball that year for the Chicago Bulls in 58 games. So is Jaden Ivey's peak going to be better than that? That's what you have to ask yourself. And if your answer is no, I think you have to trade. He'd have to be the guy you throw in, even if you have 4 times per year. That's how I look at things.
Yeah, I mean that's a different perspective to look at it. I think some people didn't like my comparison with Blake Griffin. I'm just talking about contract wise. Yeah, I'm not talking about the player. I'm not, because like Blake, you know, the one healthy season he did have, the Pistons were a 6 seed at one point, and they dropped to an 8 seed. I think that season Blake had was historically great for him. I'm not comparing the run Blake had to what Zach Lavine could possibly do. I'm comparing the contracts. And I know some people are like, oh, you know, the salary caps are going up. Who cares? If Monty Williams won't play Jaden Ivey for playing defense, I think he would have a hell of a time playing Zach Lavine. Zach Lavine is a negative defender. He's not. He doesn't really defend much. Like he'll try and stay in front of people, but like to your question, I think Jaden Ivey could be the type of player that is similar to Zach Lavine, but you have to play him to find out, man. You really do. Like, you're not playing him right now. I think Jaden Ivey can have a similar type of career if he develops properly. He develops his jump shot. You know, his 3-point shot becomes a little bit more consistent. His mid-range becomes more consistent. I think there's just such a large sample size with Zach Lavine. You saw it in Minnesota where he really developed, but they really couldn't do anything. He made the playoffs with the Bulls, but if we're being fair, that Bulls team had a lot of talent around him. That's the thing with me. It's just like, if you trade for him, what are you going to do in free agency? Is this going to be your free agency signing? Because we talked about it a couple of minutes ago. The Pistons use trades like, you know, free agency. They're going to have a lot of cap off this year because a lot of these guys are on expiring deals. But I think if you are going to trade for somebody, if you are going to trade Jaden Ivey, I don't think Zach Lavine would be the guy I look to go after.
And I get what you mean when you were saying Blake Griffin. It's kind of like a desperation type of trade where you're like, all right, this isn't working. Let's just go for the former All-Star and see if it works. And for one season under Blake Griffin, it did. He had not even arguably, he had one of the best individual seasons in a Pistons uniform ever. It was an incredible season he had for the Detroit. I think he made All NBA third team that year. But anyways, that's beside the point. Zach Lavine, if he is truly on the trade block and he's actually linked to the Detroit Pistons, even with the contract in play, I would still have such a hard time saying no, just because, like, man, I need some excitement when I watch the Pistons, and I want to see another scorer like this alongside Cade Cunningham and now Bojan. I think it could be a lot of fun. And I think since he is such an elite level shot maker, they're not going to have a problem playing him. Like, it's just, he's so good offensively. I mean, I know he's having a down year this year, but he's so good offensively. You have to play him. And again, all you need to do is stay in front of your guy a little bit, but also just have him drive into Jalen Duren, and then Jalen Duren will put him in his place. That's really all you need to do. Yeah. Again, easier said than done. If he really is on, I would love for the Pistons to at least dip their toes in it, like Bobby Marks said. Dip your toes in it, put some feelers out there, figure out what the Chicago Bulls want, and then try to bring Zach Lavine in to the Detroit Pistons. And if you don't have to give up Jaden Ivey, great. But maybe try to make Alex Caruso part of that deal too. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, I like Lavine, I do. I just don't think he's the player that I would go after. Okay. I know some people in the comment section right now are talking about Siakam, going after him in free agency. I think I would rather go after a guy like that in free agency than kind of be risky and trade for Lavine, because like Lavine's kind of a diva. Lavine's kind of like a locker room cancer. Like, he got mad that DeMar DeRozan took the last minute shot instead of him. Like, I don't want that type of like energy in my locker room. I don't want a guy that is so into himself that if K takes the last shot, he's upset with it. You know, that's the other side of the game you have to look at.